All right,
And
I'm
it's
going to
recording
start
now.
letting everyone in. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our next panel with Brian Mainofi and Eric Jacobson. Brian, I'm going to let you go ahead and take it away.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. We really appreciate you all joining us. And first of all, I want to give a big thank you to the crew at CTN. It has been a fantastic week, and the CTN has always pulled the animation community together. And even though we didn't think it was going to happen this year, you did a tremendous job. And I just want to give a big shout out and big props to everybody who overcame this enormous challenge to bring us all together this year. So thank you very much. I would like to introduce my friend Eric Jacobson, who, say hello there, Eric.
Hey, Brian. Hey, everybody.
Eric and I met the very first week of film school, I dare say 31 years ago. And
Yeah, it couldn't be that long ago, Brian.
No, okay. 31 days ago. And we were both starting at New York University Film School. And at that time, there obviously there wasn't much of an animation program even at colleges, not like there is now. There were 5 animation students in the department when I was there. And I understand now there's over 150 at NYU. It has really exploded since. And Eric, there must have been no puppetry courses anywhere. I don't even know.
I honestly don't know, because I wasn't actually pursuing a career as a puppeteer at the time.
When I know when I started at NYU, I had come from a school for the arts where I was a visual arts major, and I was just painting and sculpture and drawing. And I wanted to get into film, but hadn't even thought about animation until freshman year. I took an animation class, and it was sort of like, duh, drawing and film together. So yeah, tell me about when you started film school. What were you planning on doing, and how did puppetry enter the picture?
Yeah, I wasn't entirely sure. I had an interest in many different arts. The visual arts, I loved to draw. I love to perform, so the performing arts. I love to, to sing and I love to write and to craft out stories, and so I thought that filmmaking was a place where all of those different disciplines and passions could come together, and so I didn't know. I thought maybe I wanted to be an auteur, to be a director, and do it all, write and direct and maybe even star in my own films, which I think is probably what most film students go to film school thinking. They're going to do it all. They're going to be an auteur. And, there aren't too many auteurs around these days. It's a very collaborative art form, filmmaking. But while I was at school, after our freshman year, Jim Henson passed away, and that one event sent me in a different direction.
So you'd been experimenting with puppetry and just the fun of it before then, right? No?
Not a lot. I mean, maybe a little bit more than your average kid growing up. I loved puppets, but don't most kids.
Mm-hmm.
So no, it was really, and I loved the Muppets growing up.
Sure.
But pretty much everybody from our generation did that as well. So I don't know what it was beyond that one event of Jim passing away that kind of triggered something in me, and I realized, oh, this is what I want to do. I want to help continue this man's legacy going forward, because I did grow up watching his work and loving the
Mhm.
Muppets, and I was a Sesame Street baby. I just everything that Jim and his crew did, I felt like I was a part of his target audience,
Mhm.
and um, and the work is just so solid, and there's so much good intention behind it. Uh, it just it drew me um, in that direction. I wanted to do something. I wanted to do something I could be proud to be a part of.
Mhm.
Which after that first year at school, there were a lot of discoveries that I made that this, it's an industry, and not everybody gets to be um, that that creative auteur and do things the way they want them done. It's a collaborative process, but it's also a business.
Yeah.
And um, you know, businesses are about making money, and I wanted to do something that went beyond that.
Right.
So
I'm gonna play a little time travel here first.
yeah,
Let's go for it. Let's talk about what you've done and what I've done, and then let's go back and talk about how we started this journey.
yeah,
So,
sure.
um, I say we started together at NYU in 1989, but 1994 was a big year for us right after graduation, because you started at Sesame Street, and I started working with Chuck Jones that year. Let's just go through your career, what you've done, and then we'll go back and talk about how we started.
Okay.
Just for in case anyone doesn't
uh,
know.
I started working on Sesame Street. I guess yeah, it was 1994. Just doing really background work and assisting other people. Nothing really big. But then you know, just doing that much opened doors to other work on other shows. Um, Everything from shows on the Learning Channel and Animal Planet uh, to other shows on PBS, and
Would you say
and
that
then
there was a particular show
other
that
shows
sort of
with
like
the
your
Jim
big
Henson
break?
Company. I'm sorry.
Would you say that there was a moment that you got your big break or a show?
Gosh, it was all very gradual.
Mm.
It was all very gradual. I went to Minneapolis to work on a show uh, called Once Upon a Tree,
Mhm.
and it was for Animal Planet. And that was the first time that I got to really sink my teeth into a full-fledged character, uh, a principal character who appeared in uh, a series and appeared every episode. And so that was my first big experience with a big character. And that experience, along with the experience I had working on other shows, really did help when I returned back to Sesame Street like the following season. And it gave me the confidence I needed to go the next step and to audition for bigger parts on Sesame Street, and eventually um, take on some really big roles that Frank Oz originated.
Mhm. Um, yes, excellent. And of course, at the same time you were going over to Sesame Street, right after graduation, I was lucky enough to be picked by Chuck Jones to come and be his assistant. I got a call one day telling me I had 6 days to pack up my life and head to Hollywood. And I got out here, worked with Chuck at Warner Brothers, where he was brought back to do a Roadrunner Coyote cartoon. Um, Unfortunately, Warner Brothers didn't have the faith in it that we were hoping for at the time. So that lasted for about a year. But because of that experience, not only did I get better, but I ended up meeting all the people at Walt Disney Feature Animation. So I was asked to come over and start on Pocahontas. And so I did 10 films at Disney, from Pocahontas and Mulan and Hercules through Treasure Planet. And then as everything started to focus more on CG animation instead of drawing, and there were fewer opportunities in feature, I was again sort of recrafted myself to get into television. And so I've been working in television now on dozens of shows and working my way up there, from the Simpsons, the Boondocks, Dan Versus, Longtime, working for Seth MacFarlane on American Dad, and have been directing a Netflix series, directed the pilot for Duncanville, and now in a couple of weeks I'm going to direct another pilot for a new Netflix series, which hasn't been announced yet, so I can't talk about it too much right now. And Eric, currently, you can be seen on Disney Plus. Is the show's Muppets Now, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, after, working on Sesame Street for a little while and taking on some of Frank Oz's characters, Grover and Bert, on Sesame Street, I then went on to work with the Muppets, the classic Muppet Show characters, and I perform a number of Frank Oz's creations there as well. And so our most recent big project was a series for Disney Plus called Muppets Now, which started off as shorts, but then the Disney Plus loved them so much they wanted to put them all together and make a show out of them. And so that's delighted us, that they loved it so much, and so that's what we did. And we actually shot some kind of wraparounds from home, after quarantine started, and got that show out the door. And so yeah, it's on Disney Plus now. I think the material wound up making 6 episodes, and yeah, if we do any more, we'll do it with the knowledge that it's going to be a show, and we'll make more.
It must have been nice to shoot. I mean, as tough as it must have been to shoot from quarantine, it must have been nice to not be stuffed into a sofa or piano for once.
Yeah. Well, yeah, a lot of the live appearances that I do, I wind up getting stuffed inside of pieces of furniture, talk shows especially. I kind of dread those. But yeah, it's been nice being able to shoot from home. The commute's nice, but it's a lot of work. I gotta, all those hats that I wanted to wear as a filmmaker, I've got to wear again, and I have to do my own lighting and run the camera, do everything from behind the camera as well as in front of, and sometimes it can get to be a bit much.
Yes. So I want to talk a little bit about, obviously, because the puppeteering and controlling these characters, you were doing the voice as well as the full performance and puppeteering. And often, if I mention you to a friend, they're like, "Oh, he does the voice of Piggy or the voice of Fozzie." It's like, well, no, he does a lot more than that. Even as an animator, when I mention to people that I'm an animator, they ask, "Oh, which voice do you do?" And like, that's just not, that's
really?
not the way it works.
I wouldn't think they'd have that kind of misunderstanding with animators.
No, it's pretty amazing. I think it's
Really?
mostly because there's not, unlike an actor on television, there's not a face to put with the character necessarily.
Yeah.
And I remember one time, you were on a talk show. I think it was Stephen Colbert, and he introduced you as the voice of Miss Piggy. And I think I called you up the next week because I was furious that he only credited.
I think you're mistaking me for Frank Oz. I think if I'm recalling correctly, Colbert did an interview with Frank, and back when Colbert had his his other show. And it was really, it's a funny interview. It's a great interview. But I think Colbert knew that was going to get under his skin, or it was a very knowing question that he posed, because he was asking him about the character in the voice versus the real actor, the actor who does all of that. And of course Colbert was in character himself at the time. And it's a really funny interplay. People should look it up if they're interested. But yeah, it is a common mistake, I guess, a common misperception that people have, that puppeteers are really just voice artists, and that the puppet just kind of moves itself, I guess, or that somebody else moves the puppet, and that's kind of a secondary, unimportant job that anybody could do. And that if I play Miss Piggy, I've got this cushy job just going into a studio and a recording booth and doing the voice, and somebody else does the rest. But no, it's all one package. So it's a real-time performance that involves the animation of the character with the performance of the character, reading the lines and imbuing the character with a soul, and hopefully entertaining people. It's all real time, and it's a lot of fun, an incredible challenge, and really hard, really hard to do. I find it's very hard to this day. I've been doing it for a while, and I still find it just so hard.
I think about you every time I see Piggy singing on top of piano. It's like, oh my God, Eric is stuffed inside that piano right now.
Yeah, quite possibly. or if it was on a show like ABC's The Muppets, it was done with in green suits, and we were painted out, so we could get a little bit better manipulation of the character, without having to hide ourselves in the frame. So yeah, we were able to do some pretty amazing things on that show with the technology that's available today.
That's interesting.
That was really cool.
When we started at film school, we were learning. We were one of the last classes to learn on actual film.
Yeah.
And when I came out of here and did this cartoon with Chuck Jones, we shot it all on cells and on film. And in fact, some of the other people who were hired from some of the California schools had never worked on film. And so I ended up doing the rough edit because no one else knew how to work the splicer. But now we've seen technology just change tremendously while we've been doing this.
Yeah, well,
photos to share. I'm going to share a few photos. First of all, okay, this is a funny joke talking about voices. This is one of the greatest animators in the world, Andreas Deja. and he was the lead on the Tigger movie. And an interviewer on the red carpet had just talked to the voice who did Tigger. And along came Andreas, and they said he's the animator for Tigger. And the interviewer didn't understand what was going on. You see, the interviewer asks, obviously, you're not the original voice, so you must be the secondary voice? And he had to explain, no, I'm actually the animator, because people just don't always understand the difference there. But
yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Here's a photo
this
of
is
you.
a Bear in the Big Blue House. This is one of the earlier shows that I worked on, and it was for Disney Channel. Yeah, I'm in the back there. I'm right in the back.
But it's interesting
doubling
because
for either Pip or Pop.
You see, you're all crammed together, and
yeah.
so you're desperately hiding under the camera frame there. So, yeah, it's a contact sport what you do.
It is, and luckily, the people I work with, I really get along with well. There aren't a lot of people who go into this field, and there are even fewer who are really good at it. And so I wind up working with the same people a lot. And yeah, we all have to get really we have to get really close, and we have to like be in each other's armpits, and and not worry about it. Yeah.
Brian and Eric, sorry to interrupt,
Yes.
but we do have a question in the chat room for you, as well as some on the
Great.
Skype. So would you like to take a look at your chat room?
All right, yeah. Let's see. We were performing a two-person puppet like Fozzie Bear. Do you need to rehearse a lot before, or is it more on the spot? So is it improv movement, or how much rehearsal goes into, Eric, a two-person puppet?
Not a lot of rehearsal. There's usually not a lot of time for it. What has to go into it is a lot of experience. And that's how usually television puppeteers start out, is they assist other performers, and they get in sync with their timing and rhythms. And as an assistant, you usually do very little. Like you don't make any broad sweeping gestures doing the right hand. And we call those assistants usually right hands, because they usually are performing what otherwise would be the dead hand, the right hand of the puppet. Either that hand is rotted, or it's a practical hand like a glove that the puppeteer puts their hand in. But usually you want to just kind of blend in and kind of fade away, and not call attention to yourself or to the movements that you do as a right hand. And then every now and then I'll give my right hand an objective. Can you pick? Can you reach with your hand on this word, or do this action on this word? And otherwise, the right hand is just trying to follow along, trying to balance out the composition of the puppet on camera, and to just not call attention to itself. So not a lot of rehearsal. Now there was a show I did for Disney Channel called The Book of Pooh, which was actually a puppet version of Winnie the Pooh, and the Disney style. All the characters were were designed after the Disney animated designs, and for that it was done in like a virtual world.
You know,
It was all.
I have a photo here.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me share it. I have this. Looks like you performing some
Yeah.
sort of alien
Oh my gosh.
autopsy.
Look at that. Yeah, that is pretty
Eric's
scary.
down here in the center, if you can see.
So each of these characters, they were full body, and we performed them tabletop style in this green screen environment, and the backgrounds were all CG and could track with the camera. It was one of the earliest, I think, attempts at this kind of virtual studio, and it's pretty great. I think it turned out really great. And for that though, there was a lot of rehearsal involved, because the tracks would come in, animation style. They'd come in from the official voices, and we would learn the tracks, and there was a team of puppeteers for each of the characters. It was like 3, sometimes 4 people would work on a character to move all the body parts, because they were full body. And for that, we mapped everything out. I was the head of Piglet, and so I would map everything out, and then get my team together, and we would rehearse to the track. And sometimes for hours before we did a scene. And that was a different way of working, but it was a ton of fun. It was a ton of fun, and it was great to it was a I love Disney. I love Winnie the Pooh. I love the work of John Fielder. What he did with Piglet. I got to meet him. It was fantastic. And it was really cool to try and bring this classic animation to life in 3 dimensions. And I think we did a really nice job with it.
Yes, and when the Muppets were starting off, of course, it was Jim Henson and Frank Oz had to go through all these things to hide where they were, or the famous Kermit riding the bicycle, being towed behind a car. And then while we've been in our respective industries, the technology has changed tremendously. And now you're doing full green screen stuff. And
I still love in-camera effects. I think, especially with puppets, it adds something to the awe that I have when I watch really good puppetry. It's really cool when it's just like with a stunt. When they really did it.
mm-hmm.
It's much more impressive than when you get the feeling that they probably used a green screen. That being said, there's just some effects that we'd never be able to pull off without the technology that's available to us today. And sometimes it's still a real challenge to pull off the effect, even with the technology. So it's
since we've switched to drawing on computer, our work has tripled the amount of work that we need to do, and where that we were told the computers were going to make things easier. It ends up we're doing a lot more work than we did 15 years ago.
Is that right?
Do you find that because there is, we could green screen this bit, all of a sudden they're deciding to shoot you out of cannons or do something that's even trickier than you would ever contemplate? before
I
the
mean,
technology?
most of the work that I continue to do this day is not that ambitious. And but you know, yes, I would say sometimes it does make it, you know, even more challenging. I mean, to work in a virtual set, for instance, and I've done that in a few shows. You know, sometimes, you know, they'll animate the background and you have to get in sync with that background and like walk in place and try and make it feel as though you're traversing this space in a tracking shot.
Mhm.
And you know, and then I'll throw another challenge out there for myself sometimes. And I remember doing this with Piglet a lot, where you know he couldn't quite keep up with Pooh or other characters because he's got tiny little legs, and so he would kind of fade back, you know, and as Pooh would keep moving forward, you know, and he couldn't keep up, or he got distracted, you know, and just kind of like I'd slide him back and then, you know, turn and notice that Pooh kept going. So then, oh, I'd have to catch up. And, you know, but I have to do this retrograde motion before, you know, that I wouldn't normally have to, you know, I wouldn't be responsible for if we were in a real set.
Mhm.
And things were actually moving.
Got a
So
question,
yeah,
Brian?
yeah, it can be more challenging, but I love those challenges. I love it. And then nobody knows. Nobody knows what went into that little moment. You know, it's like it's my little secret.
I think we have another question.
Yeah.
Yes, an interesting one here. Do you think that there will ever be a film that is a combination of stop motion and 2D in the future?
Stop motion and 2D animation combined. What a great idea. I think most animators experiment with the various kinds of animation, whether it's drawn, cutouts, paint on glass, stop motion. There's so many ways to do animation. In the same way, there's many ways to do puppetry. I see the marionettes behind you. You know, there's various types of ways to create characters from inanimate objects. And the thing is that for in the professional sphere, in the money-making thing from studios, they tend to be very shy about trying new things. So animation tends to be drawn on television and CG in features, and that has all to do with costs. And it's rare, unfortunately, to get some of the stop motion films or a crazy technique like paint on glass, and they have been done, but they don't find wide distribution in the same way that you don't really see many marionette TV shows or movies, unfortunately. So the idea of combining them, I think, just makes big studios scared about whether it's going to be worth the investment. But
Now, Brian, I have a question for you.
uh-oh.
So I started off doing marionettes, and you know, all along wanting to get into television puppetry. But now that I do television puppetry, I don't really have the time to do any of the other stuff. And I find also that most of my colleagues really never even did any other kind of puppetry. Like this is their main focus. This is what they do really well. And you know, they wouldn't even know where to begin with another style of puppetry. Is that the same for animators? Would somebody be able to pull off stop motion / 2D animated project. I'm sure there are people who could, but is that something that do animators generally go down a single path, or
And
do they do different things as well?
you kind of have to. I always say it takes 10 years to learn to draw. Then it takes 10 years to learn to animate. And then if you're going to, excuse me, if you're going to try to animate with drawing versus you're going to try to animate with stop motion, it just takes so much time and investment to get.
Well, they're different. There are different tricks to each of those trades.
Big time.
Right? Yeah.
Very much. And I assume that it's the same with, because you're building muscle memory with puppetry. So having your hands work a mouth in a traditional, I don't know if you call it something different than a traditional puppet, but having your hands work the movement for a marionette must be different skills that just take so much time.
Yeah, it's completely different. It's completely different. There's maybe an overlap in sensibility, just the type of person who might be good at doing both of those things, but then you have to actually learn the nimbleness in your fingers and what to actually do to make the puppet look right.
Right. And it's possible, like in Moana, which was CG animated, but yet Maui's tattoo was drawn 2D on paper, scanned in and placed on the 3D rig. So it is definitely possible to combine them if you have a big enough crew and I suppose a big enough reason to put them together. You certainly end up employing a lot of people if you have to gather such a crew from various sub-disciplines. So yeah, interesting thought. We'll have to see whether economically it's something that would be.
I would certainly love to see it.
Yes.
Here's another one.
About, just speaking about animation and puppetry in general, I want to ask you whether you studied animation to improve puppetry, or whether other puppeteers, what their relationship is with animation. I know that when I was working for Chuck Jones, besides doing the work, he would also gather us together and just talk about animation and all kinds of stuff. And I remember him talking about how much he admired Jim Henson because he could get so much personality out of a couple ping pong balls and a sock. And he was saying, look, we have all these tools as animators, expression and movement and timing and stuff that we can do down to a single frame. But along comes Jim Henson and was able to get so much personality without the eyes and expressions and all that stuff.
No, you don't have the face to work with at all. And all that, all that secondary movement that animators do to support the primary expression or attitude of a character, that becomes everything. All that secondary stuff, that the puppet, the puppets that I work with, they can't smile, they can't frown. So it's all that secondary stuff that you would do as animators that becomes the primary way of conveying those emotions. Looking down, or opening the mouth and and nodding very energetically becomes a way of telegraphing those emotions that you would otherwise very simply do by drawing the mouth in an upward curve or a downward curve.
So you must end up with a stable of actions.
Yes.
You'd say that you use to convey what you need to, and they must be different.
When I started out, I I would make a list of all those things.
Mm.
All those, it's like it's like shorthand,
Mhm.
you know? It's shorthand for conveying different emotions. Um, and uh, in it, none of it, not well, some of it is based on things that you would see real human beings do, and some of it isn't. Some of it is just kind of like this new language that makes sense when you see it with a puppet. It's symbolic code, and that people kind of instinctively get when they see it. But yeah, it was a code that I had to first decipher myself before I could um, use it.
Mhm.
So I would write down all these things. I would look, when I first started, I watched, you know, the Muppets and puppets on television to try and get that language. But then after that, absolutely, I would study animation and see like, well, you know, what, here's a lot that I can't do with a puppet, but there's some that I can, because of, that secondary stuff that you put into um into your work. Uh and and other, other of those 12 principles, can be applied and really help um with what we do as puppeteers as well, to and just at the very least make uh make our performances more entertaining, more dynamic, fun to watch.
I have a memory of um, back when we were in college, and you had an apartment. You had set up a video camera and were practicing and recording the puppets just over and over because you had to build. I mean, there wasn't a place to necessarily learn it outside of a work setting, and so you were. I remember you building that repertoire for yourself in much the same way that as an animator after work, or we just go out and do life drawing, and it's just a gesture drawing, and just as much as possible, because we have to be able to recall a certain pose and feeling, expression in a pose as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I'm always I whenever I see really good animation, it makes me weep, though, because it's stuff that I can't do with a puppet because there's no expression on the face, or there's just so many subtle things that you can put into a single frame and have real control over, an intention behind that. I'm performing in real time. There's only so much that I can control about the puppet. Uh, there's a lot of unintended movement that just gets thrown in there.
Well,
Um,
let me
but
tell you that there's a lot of weeping on our end too. So I've got a question here for both of us. What is the most challenging thing about animating a puppet or hand drawn? And for us, for an animator, and I see this a lot. I think the hardest thing we really want to get right is the feeling of weight, because we can go along just having our character run and jump and do stuff, and if we're not constantly conscious of gravity pulling on that character, no matter how good our drawings are, the character just won't seem realistic at all. So I think constantly worrying about weight and how it affects the character's every movement is something that we concentrate the most on.
See, I don't have to concentrate on that because I am always aware of how heavy the puppet is becoming on my arm. um, that said, the puppets don't have feet normally,
Mm.
and yeah, we do have to kind of remind ourselves of that lower half of the body.
Mhm.
And so that's maybe, I don't know that that's the most challenging thing or not, but
I'd say the most challenging for you is probably your 16-hour work days.
the physicality of it can be one of the most challenging things. I remember I did a television interview once where I was crammed inside or underneath a sofa, and the position that I had to assume was so counter to what to the position I needed to be in to make the puppet look good, and I lost all feeling in my hand when I was in the interview, like a couple minutes in. And so I started to tingle at first, and then I went, oh no, because I was I was lying on the ground, my head was like this, my arm is like this, hyperextending myself. There's just no path for blood to circulate to my hand, and so yeah, the answers got shorter and shorter as that interview went along. I just got to be the most boring interview ever. I found a way to answer yes or no to the craziest questions. Yeah, so that can be one of the hardest things, definitely. But just reminding yourself of the lower half of the body sometimes. I just one thing comes to mind, in the ABC Muppets series. I did this thing where I think Miss Piggy's wardrobe gets completely trashed by a water main break, and she's just beside herself. And I just chose to go to the extreme and have her fall down on her knees and in devastation. And it was, I don't know where I came up with the idea, but it just, because I've never seen anybody do that before with a puppet, like a half body puppet, and bring them down to their knees. But I wanted her to hit down on her knees, and because it's just not something we think about that much, as puppeteers. We don't think about what's going on down there. So yeah, reminding myself, how a real human being, a real person's body moves and what it's capable of doing. I always try and, that's a great challenge. I always try and infuse that into my performances and do something that you might not have seen a puppet do before, but human beings do it. So why not a puppet? That's so that's something I try and do.
We have another question that's asking if it's frustrating to us that what we do, animation and puppetry, is often relegated to just children's programming. And I reminded of there's a quote, I'm sure someone else knows it better than I, or who said it, but it had to do that if you want to do complex storytelling, you tell adults. But if you want to do important storytelling, you tell children. And
I like that.
often I know that as much as I, in animation, want to see more complex and adult scenarios told in animation with complex designs and color palettes and everything. Being able to do movies for kids and that brings, or for families, it brings everybody together, is it's still a good feeling and a noble calling.
Yeah,
you know.
it's very rewarding. When you've done something, you feel like the whole family can sit around and watch and enjoy. I think Jim Henson and his colleagues, they were always really just wanting to entertain themselves. And if other people liked it too, that's great. That's great. But, the joy of performing really only comes across when it's joyful, when it's entertaining yourself. And so I think that's what the aim always was with the Muppets. And, I try and carry that forward. I in whatever I do, I try and mix it up, try and make it fun to do. And hopefully then that gets across to the viewer and they find it fun to watch. But it's true. Puppetry in the United States, at least, is really mostly looked at as something for children. That's not the case elsewhere in the world, and especially in theater, puppetry has a long history around the world in theater, and it's an amazing medium because you can do just about anything with puppets, and not just these, not just this. There are all kinds of different puppets out there, and pretty much anything you can imagine you can do on stage with puppetry. And we've seen some of that come over, and you see shows like War Horse or The Lion King, of course, where puppetry is really, it's presented as a work of art, and people are seeing it that way. And my hope is that doesn't ever completely go away, that people continue to see the art form for the art that it is. And I don't have to be doing that. I really enjoy doing what I do, but I am a big fan of the art form. So the more people who can see that the art in puppetry and appreciate it, the better.
Now, you've worked with pretty much every celebrity on the planet, I think, and I imagine that they must be just as excited to meet your counterpart as you may be to work with them. What you're doing is you've got
Well, they certainly don't know who I am. So
yeah, I mean, you have a character that has an entire history that maybe that you haven't been part of the entire time. And then when you meet a celebrity, or you work with celebrities constantly, they must interact with you differently than as you, but more of with the character, I imagine.
Yeah, everybody's different. Most of the actors and entertainers I've worked with who grew up themselves with the Muppets, knowing who the Muppets were, they love it. They love it. and they're really playful with the characters. You know, then there are those who either didn't grow up with them, or you know, or they're not really from the entertainment world per se, and you know, that can be kind of, it can be a little, maybe I don't know, it's kind of different, and so they don't know how to act around them.
Mm.
But yeah, but there's usually, I've very rarely come across anybody who outright did not like the Muppets for whatever reason. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a great it's a great way to interact with people that I would otherwise be too shy to go up and talk to.
We've got one more question, one final question here.
Yeah.
Asking, of all the characters that you've brought to life, do any stand out as being particularly fun? And are there any characters that you especially relate to?
I love Grover, and I love Fozzie Bear. I think they both would be really great friends. They would make really good friends, and I kind of like that about them. And they're both just really, they just want to make people happy, and I don't know, that appeals to me. I like performing them all, but
I
you
imagine
know, there's
fun
something
doing-
just really innocent and giving and generous of their spirit that draws me to them.
I imagine it must be really fun doing Animal.
Oh yeah, yeah. You know, if I want to
Entire
get anything off my chest, he's a great way to do that. Yeah, you know, I can just be primal for a little bit, and you know, after an hour though, you know, with him, I have to get a lozenge or two, because he can be a little rough on the throat.
And I say, I don't think I have especially a character I relate to, because when we're drawing a TV show, we draw all the characters for a scene. But I gotta say, I love getting moments, if a writer gives you a moment where you're allowed to just do something crazy action-wise. And they're like, all right, and I've had this happen a few times where the writer's like, all right, something incredible happens here, you go figure it out. You just make sure you give me something incredible. And it's a huge challenge, but at the same time, when you can draw almost anything in the world, you can draw anything and make it anything you want. It's sort of like, okay, challenge accepted. You're going to get something that's completely nuts in return. So that's what I look forward to when things like that happen. Listen, Eric, it was so good seeing you. Thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I
appreciate your time.
Wish we could. I'm sure we could talk like this for hours more, but maybe some other time.
Yes, I know that there's a tremendous pressure on your time at all times, taking care of so many characters as well as your family. So we really appreciate you coming out and doing this, and give our best to the family.
Will do, Brian. Thanks. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoyed, and enjoy the rest of CTN, and hope we can see you live next year.
Thank you very much, guys. You can go ahead and exit now, and I'm going to leave the slate up for a few minutes.
Thanks very much, Bruce.
All right.
Very good.
Thanks.
Bye now.